Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Ashley Howell, and I'm pleased to be today's moderator in today's webcast, capitalizing on data analytic predictions by focusing on cross-functional value of automation and modernization. I'm just going to get into a couple logistics and let you know how the agenda is going to go, and then we'll launch into today's webcast. But today we're going to begin by highlighting some of Gartner's predictions that came from the report over 100 analytic predictions through 2028. We're going to provide our perspectives on those predictions and what we're seeing in the industry. And then we're going to move into the challenges we're seeing and then dig into Gartner's 4 ways to enhance your data engineering practices, followed by discussing the importance of automation. So a few logistics before we launch into today's broadcast. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will share today's presentation out with all attendees later this week. We also encourage any questions that you might have when it arises. Please just use that Q&A box. We're going to try to make today's presentation as interactive as possible. So just pop your question in that Q&A box. We'll try to get through it throughout the presentation. But we've also allocated some time at the end to ensure that we're getting to your questions. And if we don't get to your question, we will follow up and personally ensure that we cover whatever question might arise today. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to today's presenters. We have Patrick O'Halloran. His entire professional career has been in information technology. He's got over 30 years of experience in programming, databases, and enterprise software, and he's held a variety of roles within WhereScape, and he's currently the solution architect. Patrick, thanks so much for being on here today to share your insights.
Good to be here.
We also have Mike Kaluzik. He's Infovia's Chief Operating Officer, and he's responsible for all aspects of the company's performance. That includes strategic planning, partnership development, client care, and product strategy. And he's got a lengthy career leading technology organizations for several Fortune 100 firms, including Fidelity, National Financial, and United. And he's built many high-performing, globally distributed teams. Mike, thank you for being on here to share your insights today with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Patrick and Mike.
Okay, I'll jump in first. This is going to be just, excuse me, Mike and I kind of co-hosting this and co-presenting. But at WhereScape, we are partners with Gartner. And Gartner, as you may be familiar with them, is an international consulting organization. They have, I think, around 11,000 employees. They do a lot of consulting and publish a lot of papers. If you're familiar with the Magic Quadrant, that's a Gartner product. And we have access to a lot of their papers for our internal use. And two of them jumped out, and we wanted to share some of the facts from those 2 papers. One was a list of Gartner predictions, 100 predictions they had for data analytics and operations over the next 5 years. And then the second was on challenges facing IT teams going forward. So Mike and I have talked over the last week or so and pulled out some of the 100 predictions, and we've grouped them into 4 categories: strategic leadership, data architecture, data automation, and artificial intelligence, and data security. So we're going to go through those predictions, talk about what Gartner is saying, what our personal experience is with those, and then we're going to talk about today's challenges. The disclaimer that Gartner has on, if you go to the next slide, please. I tried to scroll down that myself. I'm going, it's not working. So one disclaimer Gartner has is that their predictions are not meant to be proven right, but are meant as starting points for discussions. So they're meant to make you think about, where is data analytics headed? How is technology changing? How are structures changing? And they're meant to provoke conversations, not just to tick off a box saying this is right, this is right, this is right. And if we go to the next slide, we'll hit our first set of predictions, which is strategic leadership. And this is more around how data analytics teams are organized and what they're doing. I will once more mention the Q&A button at the bottom as we're talking. If you have any questions, if you need more information, feel free to type in any questions. And if it's appropriate, Mike and I will answer them right at the moment. Otherwise, we'll hold on to them until the end of our session. So Mike, I thought this first one was interesting. 80%, the first one, this is one of Gartner's predictions, 80% of data mesh early adopters will fail to meet strategic SLAs. And before I hand it over to you, I just wanted to mention what data mesh was, because we've heard about data fabric. What is data mesh? Data fabric is more of a technology. It's combining different capabilities within an organization on data governance, data security, data access, and all that. Data mesh is more organizational. It pushes the capabilities and responsibilities of getting information out of data systems down to the business. So you may have a group within marketing, or a group within sales, or a group within customer success, or a group within operations that is entirely self-contained and self-sufficient, building their own data warehouses and data lakes and stuff. So, Mike, what do you have to say about this? 80% of them are going to fail in achieving strategic SLAs?
Yeah, I think what happens here is what we're seeing, especially in our experience with working with so many organizations around the world, is a lot of these organizations are really underestimating the level of effort that goes into having a quality data mesh implementation. A lot of times it's going to come down to having champions that, from the top of the organization all the way to the bottom, that are really getting behind these data initiatives and really having a comprehensive data strategy. The other thing we see with a lot of our clients is they're lacking a holistic view of what's involved. So a lot of times they'll come in and they'll say, "Hey, I need a data warehouse," and I'm like, "Great, we'll help you build a data warehouse and architect it solid and so forth." And then we say, "Now let's start talking about some of the other things that need to go with the data warehouse, like data governance or access control or a good BI solution, so you can get some good actionable intelligence out of all that data." And a lot of times what we hear is, "Oh, I don't have a budget for that. That'll have to come later." And I kind of jokingly say to them, "Well, it's kind of like you asked me to build you a barn and you didn't save enough money for the horses to put in the barn." And so what I would say is a lot of these organizations, and for those folks that have joined us today, you really have to look at this as saying, what's sort of the big picture here? What do I need to accomplish going into this? Because otherwise I'm going to find myself getting, halfway there and out of money, or I'm not going to have the right resources or the right people, or I thought that I could sort of just build it on my own and figure it out along the way. And the reality is you need to bring in some good solid tools like WhereScape, or a good partner that's done it before that can help you be successful. Because ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to find yourselves marching along there and you're going to start to hit the more challenging aspects of it. And it's going to start to fizzle, and then you're going to start to lose your champions, and then you're going to start to lose credibility. And once you start losing credibility within your organization, it's really a fast downhill slide from there. It's harder to get budget, it's harder to get resources, and it's harder to stay focused on the mission. So I would just say, a lot of the reason these things are failing is really because people up front aren't estimating accurately what the level of effort is going to be and having a good plan in place. And so, we kind of started this with the bad news that it can be a struggle if you're not being really intentional about what you're doing. But then there's a lot of good news that follows this. And so let me jump into some of these other bullet points here. So the second one, organizations that focus on business value are more efficient at prioritizing data demands. And really what's being said here is, if you start looking at this from an ROI perspective, what are my deliverables? How am I going to build value for my organization? That's really where you're going to find yourself being successful. Because now you're saying, how can I go to my stakeholders and identify those things that are important to them? And then we sort of back into the project from there, and we start going after source data, and we start going after good processes, and we start understanding how important data quality is and things like that. So I would say really starting to look at your business as your customer, and then backing into the architecture and the source data is really what's going to help to flip that around and bring that 80% down significantly, especially each of your organizations, if you're looking for a way to create value and to create a return on that investment, which is then ultimately going to funnel credibility into your mission as well. And then it becomes much easier to ask for supplemental budget and so forth to continue that mission as you go forward. So and so the next couple of bullet points here really kind of talk about how do you execute on that. And so the third one here, 25% of organizations having a CDAO, and that's just a chief data and analytics officer. So think of that like your CTO, your CIO, so forth, is really having an executive level leader that is focused on data and analytics. And that again goes back to that intentionality. If you're looking for a way to be very, very proactive in your approach, you need to have an executive leader there focused on the data and analytics mission. It can't be something that your CTO is doing on the side, or your CIO, or handing that off to just say a mid-level manager. You really need that executive sponsor pushing that initiative. And Patrick, I'd say you've probably seen that a lot as well as you deal with a lot of WhereScape customers. Is those that have that executive sponsorship really tend to be a lot more successful, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, yeah. I started my career as a very technical programmer, Unix and C and assembly language and all that kind of stuff. And for probably the first 15, 20 years of my career, I was entirely technically focused. And it took that long until I realized that businesses are a business and not insurance or technology solutions. So I work for a company that develops technical tools. Most of the people that come to us are technical people. So it's very easy to focus on that. But it is the drive and the vision and the priorities set by someone who is at the business level, who's really going to make a data warehouse or any kind of data information project successful or not. You talked about data governance and things like that. It really does take someone who has a global view, not just a technical view, to scope these things out, prioritize them, and really make them successful. I was one of those programmers that sat in a dark office and someone would occasionally slide pizza under the door, and I was perfectly happy with that. But that's not why businesses are in business. That's not why software projects get started, why data engineering projects get started. It really is a different mindset to lift your head up and look at the entire business and what value you're providing, short-term and long-term, that turn a data warehouse into a very successful product. And I refer to data warehouses and things like that as products.
Yeah. No, yeah. And these last bullet points here, it's really a heavy emphasis on the fact that, in our current economic conditions, I think it's not a big mystery to anybody that IT budgets are getting squeezed. There's more scrutiny around where IT dollars are being spent, and they're looking to maximize value for that spend. And so what we're finding is really modernizing your data governance practices is a huge issue. If you're kind of going into this and just saying, hey, we're gonna pull all of our data into a data lake, which a lot of times turns into a data swamp, and then you're like, okay, now let's start querying that data, and you find that it's very difficult. You're not getting the value out of it. You're not being able to respond to the demands quickly, and so what ends up happening is you're not materializing that ROI. And by modernizing that governance strategy within your organization, have a good data catalog, have some good access control in place, have some good ontology, which is 25-cent word that basically means some business-centric words that describe your data. So as a non-technical stakeholder, I can come and say, hey, I need to answer the question about these business concepts, but I don't want to have to talk about databases and tables and columns and data types and all that kind of stuff. I want to be able to ask real questions of my data, and that's where your data governance practice is really going to come in. And from that, then you'll see here in these last couple that 2/3 of CFOs are focused on digital outcomes in their business process outsourcing. And I hear this so often with our clients is they want to know what is the outcome and does the outcome justify the spend? And then that trickles down in this last bullet point where project managers now are being expected to have that financial acumen to financially measure how the project is going and to be able to track that spend. You can't just keep throwing money at these great ideas and not consider whether or not you're getting value back for that spend. And so I would just say, as you go into these projects, it's very, very important that you think about, have you hired the right partner? Have you brought in the right tools? Do you have the right people on staff? Are you coaching them and upskilling them so that they're going to be successful in helping to build something that's going to be a no regrets implementation down the road? If you're not, then you're really setting yourself up for some struggles, for some credibility issues and so forth. So, and with that, we've got a great question about WhereScape in the Q&A there. Patrick, do you want to take that one?
Sure. The question from Siva is, how is WhereScape adapting and evolving in response to the widespread effects of generative AI? The way I talk about this is that generative AI, ChatGPT and things like that are kind of where Wikipedia was maybe 15 years ago. It's a resource that some people use, but no one really quite trusts yet. there's certainly cases where I think it was a couple attorneys who got fined by a court because they used generative AI to generate legal briefs, and ChatGPT was inserting fictitious case sightings. So it's a fun tool. It's fun to play with. We use it. One of the things WhereScape does is we use templates to generate all the DDL and DML and technical stuff that needs to get done to build a data warehouse. Some of that's written in Python. We've actually used ChatGPT to generate Python scripts. So suppose we've got a source system that is a fixed width file or a web API or something. We've used ChatGPT directly to come up with a rough draft of Python script, Python code. That seems to work. I know it's on our roadmap. Excuse me. We're really focused more on the creation of the data warehouse. I had this question at a TDWI conference, about a year and a half ago. And my response then was that I don't think ChatGPT or generative AI is going to affect the creation of the data warehouse just yet. I think in 3 or 4 years, I could give you a very different answer. I think when most people talk about AI and talk about generative AI and machine language learning and things like that, they're talking about using the data that's in the data warehouse, not actually creating the data warehouse. So for the short term, I would say we definitely have an eye on it. Ideally, I wrote a nice blog post. I think it's a nice blog post a few weeks ago talking about automation and data warehousing, and the top level automation was AI generates everything for you. You have your business question, and whether the data exists already or is consolidated already or not, some artificial intelligence will go out and consolidate it all and deliver it to you. So the short answer, after talking for a couple of minutes, is that we know it's there. We know it's going to impact data analytics. We're not quite sure how it's going to impact the creation of the infrastructure that data analytics uses, which is where WhereScape is focused. Mike, you may have a broader answer in terms of just at a business level, how is ChatGPT affecting larger projects or generative AI?
Yeah. In fact, really the name of the game here is automation. We're going to talk a little bit about that more as we get into the next couple of slides. Today, it's all about how fast can you get to market with your solution. And I don't mean market like you're going to go sell your data warehouse. Maybe you're going to sell your data, your analytics, but really it's how fast can I get my stakeholders to a place where they can get the answers, the actionable intelligence, so they can react to market opportunities rather than watching those opportunities pass them by. And so that's where we use WhereScape heavily in our practice, because we can come in and we can build a data warehouse with WhereScape in a fourth the time of doing it the old-fashioned brute force way. And we've done that time and time again. A lot of times we'll go in and just to do a proof of concept when we're talking to a prospective customer, and we'll say, give us 8 to 10 of your, loosely related tables. And in a day and a half, we can build them a soup to nuts data warehouse, from loading that data all the way to an Infomart layer and being able to demonstrate all the in-betweens as well with that tool. The next evolution in that is something that we're working on right now internally, is we're sort of hyper automating what we're doing with WhereScape. So we're actually building the capability to interview people within an organization to understand what their job is, have them describe a day in the life of their company. And then we can feed those narratives into an AI consumption engine that we are developing. And it can then pull out the business objects and it can form a data model from that. And we can get 80% of the way to a data model in the click of a button, simply by interviewing various people within the organization. And then we go in and, that's when the real architecture and the art side of that starts to take place, as we get it dialed in. So we get it to that 100% mark for their data model very quickly. So now what we're doing is we're taking it from a fourth of the time to build a data warehouse. Now maybe we can get it down to a 10th of the time to build a data warehouse, simply because we're leveraging those AI tools that help us really do some of the stuff that's more mundane and boilerplate, and being able to get there a lot faster. So opportunities are opening up, and we're seeing that, and a lot of organizations are capitalizing on the capabilities within AI. So I would say definitely continue to be exploring it. I would say even if you don't have a strong AI initiative within your organization, make sure you're staying educated about what AI is, what it can do, what some of the mainstream tools are that are out there. Because even if you don't have a big AI initiative in your organizations, it's going to be important to understand how to have the conversation. And as you start to have those conversations, it's going to create an impetus for more innovation within your own organizations.
Yeah, you mentioned something in there that made me think about a differentiation I heard a long time ago. The difference between verification and validation in software. Um, Verification is, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing things the right way? And that's where automation with WhereScape can definitely help, in that you've got a standardized approach to developing things. Validation is, are we doing the right thing? And that's where definitely where Infovia and someone like that who's got experience in building data warehouses can come in. There's technical gaps that people have, there's architectural gaps that people have, there's business gaps that people have. And I think one of the things you'll hear us hammer on today is it makes business sense to go to an outside resource to bring in and fill in those gaps. I've got an ego. I'm a programmer. I always think I can solve problems all by myself, but there comes a point where I've got to go outside and talk to someone else, bring in someone else who's got the experience, has made the mistakes before, to help me really get the business requirements done. Mike, do you want to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, let's hit the next slide here.
Okay. So it's about cloud platforms, data hubs, business-centric architecture. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the first bullet point's kind of an obvious. I think everybody realizes that we're moving away from physical data centers into the cloud platforms for a variety of reasons. A lot of them are economic. A lot of them are skill set. Those data centers are very expensive real estate, so on and so forth. We're really seeing there's not particularly a bias for one cloud platform or another. We see a lot of Snowflake, a lot of Databricks, a lot of Azure, Synapse. You've got AWS has their offering as well. You know, those kind of, and then you've got the Google platform as well with BigQuery. So those are kind of like the big five that we're seeing people gravitating toward. But we're definitely seeing a lot of that. You know, we just recently helped a big international company move from Teradata to Snowflake. So we're seeing those migrations happen. There's demand is going up for those because I think people are starting to realize that they're going to ultimately be able to manage their IT budgets more efficiently and bring down that spend by moving to those cloud platforms. Now, it's not to say that you have to do that. We do have clients as well that are still building their data warehouses on-prem SQL Server, and that's perfectly fine as well. But we are seeing that shift there. This next point, though, which is really starting to get into the meat of it, is we're seeing more data come into play. Organizations that we're working with, they want to bring in 20 data sources. They want to bring in all their IoT data, which, you know, we have one client that they're focused on sensors on delivery trucks. And so they can tell if you're doing hard braking, getting too close to objects, if you're speeding. They have AI-based cameras in the cab that say, are you on your phone while you're driving or eating a cheeseburger while you're driving? And all that stuff gets fed in real time. And then we have AI enabled or dashboards that are then ingesting that in real time. And they can see, hey, we're having issues over here in this part of the country or that part of the country. So that type of thing is continuing to happen. And so when we talk about, you know, multiple data hubs, really what's happening is we're getting data in from a lot of different places. We're starting to have requests for cross-organizational data consumption. So you may have the warehouse people and the HR people and the finance people all wanting to look into each other's data in order to answer the questions that they have to answer. And so as this data consumption trend continues to tick up, you will see multiple data hubs. A lot of organizations are looking to answer complex questions and go after market opportunities by looking at data across the organization. And so you really got to start thinking about, how am I structuring my data such that I'm going to be able to empower my stakeholders to get at that data and to be able to have that cross-organizational querying capability. And this next bullet point here is really what answers that. Is it's really taking that business-centric architecture in your strategic planning. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times we've built source-centric data warehouses where we've got 20 different source systems. They're all written by different vendors. They all have different kinds of structure. And we bring that structure into our data warehouse. And then we think that we're going to do some sort of a cross querying across all those various structures. And that just creates tremendous amounts of pain. And the longer you continue to build out that data warehouse, it becomes more painful until eventually it just becomes this brittle black box that people stop touching because they're afraid of breaking it. By taking a business centric approach, you say, okay, I'm gonna use business terminology. It goes back to that word I said before, ontology, where you're really saying what what is a warehouse, what is a driver, what is a truck, what is a product, and those are the terminology that you use. And so when we leverage WhereScape and we're building out a data vault, which is a more modern methodology compared to the old Kimball and Inman styles of building data warehouses, it's all about a business centric terminology in there. So then as a non-technical stakeholder, I can say, I need to understand and start using a bunch of business terms to ask the question. And then that very easily can be drawn out of the data. So Patrick, what are you seeing with your clients?
Two things. You mentioned Data Vault and having a business focused ontology design rather than a source system design. I've done some webinars with Dan Lindstedt, who's the founder and inventor of Data Vault. And he says the number one thing you can do to ensure you have absolute total failure is to do source system modeling. Model your raw vault after a single source system. Data Vault is front heavy in that you have to do a bit of more analysis up front, business analysis, talk with the end users, talk with the businesses themselves to find out, as you said, what is a customer, what is a product, what is an employee, what information is vital that we know about them, independent of any source system that you have. And again, I'm always approaching things from a technical background. I want to work bottom up and say, okay, here's the attributes of we have on this system for a product. That's what we'll start with. And I've got to relearn that that's not the right way to do a large system, especially a data vault. The other thing I've seen happening, and I'm not sure if it may come up on the slides coming up, but looking at data as a product. I was talking with Mike Ferguson, who's a thought leader in the UK and EMEA, and he talks about data products, where you're not just building a data warehouse, but you're building well-defined, well-structured, well-curated sets of data that may be used internally, may be sold externally. I was at Snowflake Summit, and there were a couple of people there that were in their booth advertising commoditize your data. So I think an internal business approach is one way of thinking about data and your data warehouses and building them, but also as an external business asset, being able to commoditize and sell your data, I think is also going to be quite big in the next few years. And again, all this is reiterating the idea that it's a business. It's not a technology. It's a business, and the things you're doing need to reinforce what the business is doing. So this panoptic, holistic approach, the idea of product marketers using data-driven segmentation, that's another thing I've seen a lot of in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm sure it's going to go forward, is database data warehouses becoming what I would call operational data warehouses. No longer just analytic systems, but systems that are gathering data near real time and influencing operations on a real-time basis, whether it's through automation and changing manufacturing, whether it's writing emails and getting those sent out to specific customers for marketing, whatever it is. I think the data warehouse is going to become more and more part of operations and less part of just a pure analytics of we load data overnight and then generate reports the next day.
One of the things I want to call out here, we talk a lot about metadata these days, and you'll see it in a couple of these bullet points here. And really where we're seeing a tremendous opportunity is the ability to not only create metadata as we create our data warehouse, but then to leverage that for downstream activities as well. I mentioned earlier the one client we had that moved from Teradata to Snowflake, and they had built their data warehouse in Teradata over the last 15 years using WhereScape. And then we were able to leverage all the metadata from that in order to translate all of their Teradata SQL into Snowflake SQL, which is a little bit different beast. And if that metadata hadn't been there, the project would have easily been 2 or 3 times the length that it was, simply because we didn't have that consistency and that ability to look into that metadata and process it appropriately. And I'm sure that you see that as well, Patrick. Maybe talk a little bit more about, what, from your perspective, what is metadata and how many different tentacles does it have throughout your data?
Well, metadata used to be something as simple as system tables in Oracle or SQL Server, which were names of tables, names of columns, maybe some stats on data distribution and things like that, variable types, things or column types, things like that. Metadata now is a much broader thing. It includes, in the sense of a data warehouse, things like data lineage. Where is the source data coming from? How is it being transformed? What are all the transforms that are being done? How are we getting to these final dimensions and facts, or whatever reports and analytics we're doing? Being able to do that whole data lineage forward and backward. So I can start at a report, and a question always comes up: do you trust the data? Where did this data come from? Why is this number the way it is? Where did this name come from? With real metadata, you can actually go back, and automation, you can go back and automatically recreate that entire path that data took from multiple source systems, maybe through multiple calculations, maybe through multiple business rules. If you're doing that manually, you've got to dig through a lot of code. You've got to find the code, you got to decipher it, you got to read it, you got to understand it. The idea of using warehouse automation to capture all that data and those actions you're taking and the relationships of the data is a lifesaver. As I said, we can do track back, track forward diagrams with a few clicks. You mentioned a manufacturing company moving from Teradata to Snowflake. I worked with a large Midwestern insurance company, one of the Blue Cross Blue Shield companies. They were migrating from Teradata to Snowflake as well as a pilot project. And they had a large data warehouse with, I think, 800 to 1,000 objects in it. And they asked us how long, we've been using WhereScape and Teradata, how long is it going to take to recreate this data warehouse in Snowflake? And this is an exception. It just so happened that they didn't have much customization. So we were able to look at their metadata, and we gave them an estimate of 40 hours. 40 hours to entirely recreate all of their Teradata of 5 or 6 years of development, recreate everything in Snowflake. Now, there's a lot of other parts of that project that involve getting data migrated, getting testing done, things like that. But as far as replicating the data warehouse in Snowflake from Teradata, all that was done within a week. So that's some of the power of metadata, because we're capturing not how someone is doing something, but why they're doing it, and the work around what they're doing. So we can recreate that, whether it's Teradata or Snowflake or SQL Server. Those technical details of implementation can all be driven by the metadata.
Yeah, no, that's great. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here.
The composable architectures, that's the one I saw earlier that I was thinking about, Mike Ferguson talking about data products, where you have, again, products that are going to be used internally or externally, where you have this good curated assembled data, and that feeds into data mesh, where now you've got independent groups, the marketing group, the manufacturing group, customer success, finance group, whatever it is, that can now use these curated, documented data products and do composable architecture. They can build things up from these building blocks. I think that's definitely going to be a change in how we look at data. I think the whole concept of the data warehouse is going to be less some monolithic project that was created by IT and thrown over the wall. And instead, there's going to be more small Lego blocks that are delivered that then the individual functional departments within an organization can reassemble them and reuse them as they see fit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes back to just that notion that we're bringing in more data, and the ability to intelligently structure that data so that it's easily consumed is just becoming more important with all of the clients that we're dealing with today. You know, and that sort of flows into the second bullet point here, and the third one as well, where automation is key. You can't do things the old-fashioned manual way anymore. You know, the days of going out and writing 100 SSIS packages in order to move your data around, it's just not efficient, and it's not nimble enough anymore to be able to get you to where you're trying to go. Because by the time you write all that code and validate the code, and then you confirm that it's all working correctly, your mission has shifted, and now you're going back, and it's sort of this constant thing here. when you work with a good automation tool, what you're going to find is that the stuff that's sort of mundane and easy, like sucking in data and then transforming it and then moving it to an infomart layer, if you can automate those pieces, then you can really focus on the pieces that need that sort of care and feeding as you go forward. And so anything that you can automate today, you really need to be doing it. You got to get away from doing anything manual that can be automated. And then additionally, just continuing to look for ways to leverage your metadata. You know, as Patrick was saying, whether it's with your lineage, with your documentation, with generating your data catalog, you know, so on and so forth. All of those things are going to help you down the road. And especially, you know, we all know that what we build today, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to move it to another platform. Something else is going to come up. It's going to be a better use case for us to move to that new platform. And so the more we invest today in our metadata, the easier it's going to be to make that migration down the road. It's just, I can't overstate it enough how important it is to automate, leverage your metadata. And then this fourth point here is around data quality. We're finding that organizations that struggle the most, it usually comes down to the quality of their data, the quality of the data and understanding your data. And we find that oftentimes when we go in and we engage with clients, we end up spending a lot more time up front simply helping them work through the process of understanding their business and their business rules. Most organizations underestimate their understanding of their business and their business rules. And so that's typically where we get bogged down. The more you can do today to spend time really understanding what your business rules are, documenting those, and then using those as your source of truth as you go forward is going to help you drive your data quality. You know, the last point on here around AI is talking about the fact that we're leveraging AI more and more with our data, but AI is only going to be as good as the quality of your data. And if you're not focused on data quality and cleaning up your data, getting rid of all those anomalies and going down to the source and the root cause of your lack of quality in your data, you're going to find yourself with this uphill slog constantly going forward. So it's just super important that data quality and understanding your business processes has to stay sort of at the forefront of your mission as you're going forward, if you're going to continue to streamline what you're doing and be able to rapidly go to market with these new innovative initiatives. So, Patrick, anything you would add to that?
Yeah. You mentioned having someone who understands the data. One of the things we do as part of our sales process is we'll do a 2.5-day proof of concept where we'll install WhereScape on a prospect's infrastructure. You mentioned this earlier. You mentioned getting 8 or 10 tables and building a fully functional prototype data warehouse. We'll do something similar where we'll go through business cases where they have work to do. And one of the determining factors, and we ask this when we're talking about requirements, one of the determining factors in the success of that is having someone who understands the data, someone who is that bridge between the DBAs and the analysts, someone who has a foot in each camp, so to speak. And that's very, very, very important. Excuse me. Having someone who can take a more holistic view of both the technology and the data and the business needs. And a lot of times that's Mike and Infovia coming in, giving you a broader view with their experience of dozens of data warehouses, if not hundreds of data warehouses. They've built projects they've seen. I was talking with Mike Monday saying, it's nice to learn from your mistakes. It's better to learn from someone else's mistakes. Most companies could probably figure things out on their own, but it's going to be a lot faster and a lot better bringing in someone who's been down the road before.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just call out this next to the last bullet point here about vendors leveraging continuous intelligence. You know, one of the things that we're seeing is empowering sort of the lay people in your organization. And what I mean by the lay people, the non-technical folks, to go and do their own data and analytics. When I was at the Gartner conference last spring, one of the things that stood out to me was that there are literally 2, 3, 4 dozen self-service analytics tools out there intended to be put into the hands of your non-technical users to basically do their own data analytics, data mining. and those tools are becoming more sophisticated and easier to use. And I guarantee you that as you continue to drive forward with these types of initiatives, your users are going to notice when the numbers aren't right, when the data is not right, when it's telling a story that they know isn't true. And that's going to come back to that data quality topic again. So I would say as these tools start becoming more and more affordable and more ubiquitous across organizations, we want to make sure that we're empowering our stakeholders, our non-technical folks, to be able to do a lot of their own self-service analytics, because then that's going to free up your data organizations to focus more on creating opportunity rather than responding to tasks and tickets that is happening today. And the only way that you're going to get there to that self-service model is really by creating credibility with the data. And that again is just another way of saying data quality and good structured data, so that it lends itself well to those types of self-service automation tools.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen in a lot of businesses is we call them dark warehouses, where the analytics team has been given access to data warehouses, and whatever they're getting from the IT is not quite meeting their needs. Maybe they think it's taking too long to get results. Maybe it's tickets are taking too long to work, whatever it is. So they start building their own pathways into the data sources and building their own little data warehouses outside of IT, outside of the standards and scope and oversight of IT. I think AI, I think automation definitely helps in standardizing what gets done as well as producing things faster. So I think those dark warehouses kind of go away, and you really start to reach to what data mesh was meant to be, which was self-service with global standards, not just each group running off and doing their own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide here. Talk a little bit about security and what we're seeing there. We're finding more and more that organizations want to share their data, but they're scared to death to share their data. There's so many regulatory things that are protecting data these days, whether it's the European standard, or it's PCI, or it's HIPAA, or it's FERPA, and the acronyms don't end. Data has to be protected, but data has tremendous value. And when you understand your data, you can leverage that to create market opportunities. And so what we're finding, and these are a couple more predictions coming out of Gartner, which are not a big surprise to us, is with AI tools becoming more and more common, there's literally thousands of tools out there today that are open source that you can leverage to do things with AI, from writing your term paper to creating videos and pictures and music and so forth. But unfortunately, what's happening as well is it's empowering the bad actors to do what they do. And so we're finding that more and more organizations they're falling behind the curve there, if you will. And what we have to do is we have to figure out a way to protect the data while at the same time continue to enable sharing of the data. And so a lot of organizations are choosing to outsource that protection of their data, simply because they want to bring in experts that can not only put in place a good solid tool for controlling the way that data is managed and who accesses and who doesn't, but they also want people that are focused on that, as that's their day job, to protect that data so that they can focus more on creating business opportunities out of that data. Really what we're finding here is that the traditional access management solutions are just not scalable anymore. And that's Gartner's prediction, and we've seen that as well. And we really have to start adopting new approaches. And so there are a number of solutions out there. Infovia has a solution called InfoSecure that we use with our clients that allows you to have a policy-based solution. So rather than the old-fashioned way of creating a report, and then all of a sudden you find, well, somebody else needs that same report, but they're not allowed to see certain data, or somebody else wants a field or two added to their version of that report. Now you have this report sprawl problem where you have a half a dozen flavors of the same exact report, and now you got to manage access for all half dozen of those instances of that one report. And now think about if you have 100 or more reports across your organization, what that looks like. So what we've done with InfoSecure is we basically said, write it once for the broadest use case, and then use policies and users and roles to control what appears on that instance of that report, depending on who's running it. So if Patrick's running the report, he gets to see everything. Great. If I run the report and, I'm not supposed to see social security numbers, or I'm not supposed to see salaries, or whatever the case is, then it's going to drop that or mask it or partially mask it. Maybe only get to see the last 4 digits of the social security number or something like that. So that's what InfoSecure does for our clients. And there are other tools out there, but the bottom line is you really have to start looking at how are you protecting your data, but still empowering your organization to leverage your data so that you can start creating those market opportunities from it. And whether it's monetizing your data or just simply drilling into it and finding out where are your highest quality customers, where are your struggling opportunities, and so on and so forth. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day, is how are you going to continue to drive ROI by innovating ways to leverage your data and doing it in a way that is safe and secure. Patrick, anything you'd want to add to that?
Sure. I've seen InfoSecure, and I think it's a great tool. I'm looking at the second line that says new approaches must be adopted. Traditional access management is no longer scalable. People used to try and put access security into the data warehouse itself. So maybe as they're writing ETL code, maybe they're adding transforms, maybe they're adding data encryption, whatever it is, data masking, things like that. There's a couple problems with that. One of which is you're assuming that everyone who handles that code, who handles that product, is doing it correctly. The other thing is changes are really, really difficult. What I like about InfoSecure is it's at the database level. So regardless of how you're accessing the data, whether it's through the data warehouse or through SSMS or through some ad hoc query system, the same rules apply, the same standardization applies. That's one of the huge benefits of automation, is consistency and universal appliance of all the rules. So I would definitely encourage people to check out InfoSecure. It works very, very well, as I said, at a database level. And as you said, allows for role-based security rather than every single thing being a one-off.
Yeah, absolutely. Good deal. All right, well, let's move into the next section now. Patrick, I think you were going to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing today, and then we'll talk a little bit about what WhereScape is in a little more detail.
Yeah, so these are just some bullet points we put together. Lack of trust, new compliance and regulation, things just constantly changing, more data from more sources, difficulty in finding staff, debugging, testing, reworking takes too much time, communicating what data is available, documentation, and then the cost to maintain high reliable data infrastructure is skyrocketing. So there's decades of work that's been done on building what were originally called operational decision support systems or operational support systems, which became data warehouses, which became data lakes, which became data vaults. The whole system of everything, where you're getting data from, how much data you're collecting, how you're regulating it, the number of people involved in building the systems is just growing and growing and growing. More data from more sources. We've now got web APIs, we've got JSON files, XML files. We're pulling data from a dozen different databases. That's something that didn't exist 10 years ago. Debugging and testing and reworking. I've got a nice stacked bar chart that shows how much work is actually spent. As a programmer, I would say that I spent maybe a quarter of my time actually writing code. I probably spent half my time debugging my own code and a quarter of my time doing something even worse, which was debugging someone else's code. It's easy to think of a programmer's job is to write code. That's a data engineer's job is to write ETL code or transforms or create these things. Really, your job is to add value to the business. And coding and designing and things like that are only part of that. One of the things you've really got to take into account is the whole life cycle of a piece of software, whether it's ETL or a program or whatever it is, and the maintenance that has to be done on it. I would estimate that there's probably 4 times as much effort spent on maintaining a product as there is developing it. So the more you can do to make maintenance easier, the more sustainable that thing is. Mike mentioned systems is growing and growing and growing. If you're doing data source modeling, you're just adding more tables, adding more dimensions, adding more facts, trying to understand business rules that someone implemented 5 years ago. automation takes care of a lot of these issues, including really focusing on the maintenance. I can generate facts and dimensions in a matter of minutes, starting with a source system. Doesn't matter if the source system is Snowflake or SQL Server on-prem or Synapse or an XML file or CSV, whatever it is. I can create a fact or a dimension out of that using automation, using WhereScape automation in a matter of minutes. And the nice thing is it works, and it works the first time. We've got one customer that their QA department decided that any objects or any code that was generated through WhereScape's automation no longer had to go through unit testing and could go straight into integration testing. What that meant was for this group that was generating 200 to 300 objects that were going to go into production, let's say it takes 4 hours to design, run, and debug a unit test. They just saved themselves 800 to 1,200 hours of testing work because they had the confidence that because of automation, they were able to get things done much faster. Bullet point 6, I want to talk about communicating what data is available, where is it coming from. Documentation is a huge thing. I always describe documentation as the phase of a project where everything's done and someone runs around and grabs all the post-it notes and types everything into Word. And the problem with that is as soon as you hit save, it's obsolete. The nice thing about automation, the nice thing about metadata, the nice thing about having that commonality in place is we're not just generating code, we're also capturing all the lineage and everything, plus whatever additional documentation you want to add. You want to add examples to facts and dimensions. You want to add comments saying that these units are in kilograms. You want to add comments saying that the granularity is 1 row per customer, whatever it is. All that's captured as metadata as well. So you can have documentation generated every morning in a development environment, understanding that all the developers, all the analysts that come in that morning will have that new documentation available. They'll be able to answer a lot of questions themselves rather than going back and forth through email chains. I would say the biggest impact on data warehouse development going forward is going to be technical resource limitation. Right now, Databricks is fairly new. Snowflake's been around 6 or 7 years. AI is brand new. Who knows what's going to be out there in 2 or 3 years? Are you building a system now that can be sustainable in 2 to 3 to 4 years when you don't know what's going to be out there in 2 or 3 or 4 years? You need flexibility in place so that you can build a very robust system using automation, using the experience of outside consultants who can come in and tell you what their experiences are, what they've done in the past, where they see things going. I think that's probably the biggest thing I could say about overcoming some of these challenges today is obviously going with automation and bringing in outside consultants such as Infovia who have experience working with many customers in many environments and have seen things progress. They'll have a much better idea of it's better to draw conclusions from 15 examples than to just use your own personal experience with 1 or 2 examples.
Yeah. No, very true. Totally agree with you. All right. Well, let's move to the next slide here.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes left. This is the talk I usually give about data warehouse automation and what's the case for it. We've talked about this a lot already, so I'll just hit this slide up very briefly. Cost, obviously labor costs. There's costs associated with projects being late, projects not getting done. Gartner, in I think 2022, had a report that said that the costliest and riskiest projects that IT departments can take on are building data warehouses. Because traditionally, IT department would get some requirements, they'd go away, and 9 months later, 12 months later, they turn over a data warehouse and the analyst would go, this isn't what we want. There's certainly a lot of cost that builds into risk. How do you ensure that what you're building and the amount of time you're building is actually going to be useful for something? Complexity, I mentioned all the new kinds of data sources, data targets, new analytics that are being done. Urgency, the pandemic certainly showed that organizations' requirements can really change on a dime. And then agility. As I said, I can build prototypes. Mike talked about this as well. Very fast. That's certainly a key part to the agile development environment is the idea that prototypes are as important as hard requirements. If I went to, as an IT department and went to the analysts and said, what do you guys want? Their response is going to be, what have you guys got? They don't know what they want until they see it. I've run into that for decades. So the idea that I can create very fast prototypes, I can add transforms, I can manipulate data, I can add aggregates, rankings right in front of them. And then the analysts can use Tableau or Yellowfin or Power BI, whatever tools they're used to using. They can query an actual working data warehouse. That goes miles. The next slide, please. And we've mentioned a lot of these things. What WhereScape does, increase developer productivity. And I'll reiterate that it's not just the development that's improved, it's the maintenance, which I think is a bigger hidden cost that people don't really think about. Scale with standards and data ancestry. We've got full data lineage. I can build a data warehouse with 100 objects or 10,000 objects. It'll all be built consistently. The standards are the same, whether it's security or governance. All that's built in. So if Mike is working on something or I'm working on something, I don't have to worry that a new consultant coming in is going to be doing his or her own thing using their own standards, because automation really enforces a consistent quality. Trust and continuity. We're capturing all the data. So if you do bring in consultants, if you do have turnover in your staff, a lot of knowledge in their head doesn't walk out the door when they leave, because a lot of that knowledge has been captured through metadata. And then own your data. The idea that I've got control over the data, I know where it came from, I know what happened to it, I know what's being presented, is a huge part of WhereScape. And the next slide, please.
All right, let me just take a moment here. In the interest of time, I'll be brief. Just talk a little bit about who we are at Infovia. We are a holistic data strategy and execution company. So we work with our clients to help them not only formulate their data strategy, but then we'll help them on the implementation side as well. And as I mentioned previously, it's not just come in and build a data warehouse, but it's, let's talk about the stuff that needs to go with that. Data governance, maybe managed services. So we'll help our clients make sure that the data continues to load continually through the night, and in order to ensure that they have fresh data every morning. In the case of some of our clients, we're loading data every 15 minutes, and we have to make sure that it continues to perform well. We'll provide BI solutions to our clients. And we also provide mentoring and training to our clients. A lot of our clients have no IT staff, and they'll say, hey, can you come in and build everything and then own it and take care of the care and feeding of it going forward? And we're like, happy to do that. We have other clients that say, hey, we have an IT staff, but they're not experienced in WhereScape. They're not experienced in Data Vault or some of these other technologies. Would you be willing to come in and teach them what you know so that they can take care of the care and feeding of it down the road? And we'll do that model as well. And then we kind of have a hybrid in the middle as well, where we'll kind of do some peer programming and we'll help along the way. And then we continue to walk with those clients going forward once everything's fully implemented, and just being a resource for them when they run into some speed bumps. So our contact info is going to be on the last slide. Feel free to reach out. Love to have a conversation with you if you have needs and you're considering a data strategy in the near future. So I think we have one. Oh, anything you want to say?
Yeah, very briefly. Also mentioned there is a Q&A button if you have any questions about anything we've talked about. And we'll have some contact information at the end. So if you have a brilliant question that you think of 5 minutes from now or 30 minutes from now, don't hesitate to reach out to us. This is a slide we've used for a while. We call it the Stairway of Doom, because it just shows in a manual process all the tools, all the changes, all the different groups, all the people involved in going from requirements to documentation. And if you go to the next slide, there's a few build-up things before we get to the next slide. This is what automation does. It allows you to integrate all these. So you've got a single pathway, fewer handoffs. Every time you change a tool, every time you go from a Word document to an ERD to something, anytime you hand off from a DBA to a developer, there's always a chance of making mistakes. And here's the contact information we talked about. We are coming up on the top of the hour, just a few minutes away. As I said, the Q&A button's there. Feel free to contact us anytime you want. We'll be glad to talk with you about Infovia, about WhereScape, about data warehousing in general. If you have general questions about why Data Vault, if you want more information about anything we've talked about, both of us would be more than happy to talk with you. It doesn't have to be specifically about our products or our companies. We have a lot of experience in data warehousing. And as I said before, it really helps. It helps to have someone who's walked down that path before to kind of lead the way.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't see any questions right now. Mike?
No.
Thank you,
No,
Patrick. Mike.
Yep.
I had a couple that just came in, so let me just get to a couple of these and then we'll conclude. And as they said, feel free to email us. We'll also ensure that the recording's shared out. But one good question that came in was Gartner's predictions offer insights into future trends. How do you anticipate industry pioneers like WhereScape and Infovia contributing to these developments?
Yeah, I mean, I could take that one first.
Okay.
A lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to stay on the front end of that, of where things are going. We're not simply riding the same old tired horse. We're constantly innovating. As I mentioned earlier, we're leveraging some AI orchestration in front of WhereScape so that we can hyper automate that modeling process. And so as we continue to keep our fingers on the pulse of the industry and where things are going, a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower our clients to get to market faster. And that's only going to happen if we continue to stay abreast of what's happening. As I mentioned earlier, keep yourself educated so that you can at least have the conversation around AI. You may not be an AI expert, you may not have an AI mission within your organization, but at least be able to have that conversation because it's going to pay dividends down the road. Patrick, anything you want to add?
Yeah, two things. I would say that over the last 3 years, WhereScape has spent a huge amount of time and effort and R&D on really shoring up the internals of our product. We've taken a lot of the core functionality and externalized it, so that if we do have new technologies, if we do have new features and functions we need to add, we can release those as what we call enablement packs rather than having to recode our product. Quick example is Databricks. We had a couple of prospects ask about Databricks, and we realized that we needed to come up with some support for it. So probably within about 2 months, we had a working enablement pack where we now supported Databricks. And within about 6 or 7 months, we actually had it productized and supported on our website. So we've spent quite a bit of time and effort just keeping our product modernized, being able to add new features, new functions, being able to add REST APIs, being able to parse JSON files and XML files, and things like that very, very quickly. Another thing that's come up is, we didn't talk about too much today, is Data Fabric and Microsoft Fabric. And questions been coming up over the last couple of months, where does WhereScape fit in with that? And we also have spent a lot of time working on integration of our product with other products. So one idea of Data Fabric is you have a universal look and feel for everything. That's Microsoft's vision of what Data Fabric should be. Just like you've got Microsoft Office, they want to have Microsoft Fabric. The other idea of Data Fabric is you've got tools that can work integrated with each other, which may come from different vendors. So we're definitely working on integrating WhereScape, our design tool and our implementation tool, with Calibra, with Git, with other operational deployment tools and things. So we're definitely staying on top of that. It's quite a bit of our R&D budget is spent on the infrastructure of the product, I should say, and that's definitely been paying off.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mike. We're going to conclude today's webinar. I thank all the attendees for taking time out of your day to spend with us. Look out for that recording and don't hesitate to reach out with more questions. Thanks again, Mike and Patrick, for sharing your insights. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.